All right, it's 1T, and in this video, we'll be learning how to factor by grouping. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, if I say factor out the GCF, this is something that you need to be able to do in order to factor by grouping. So we're just going to kind of step back for a minute and make sure you know how to factor out a GCF. And if this doesn't provide enough information, you may want to go and watch my video that introduces factoring, and it also talks about how to factor out a GCF. So let's go ahead and get started. On number one, we have 9x squared minus 15x. And if you look at those two terms, these two here, we're looking for the greatest common factor. Well, for 9 and 15, that would be 3. And notice 9x squared has two factors of x, and 15x has 1. So they have one factor of x in common. And so our GCF is 3x. And since there's two terms here, we're going to have two terms in parentheses. When we do this, we're basically doing the distributed property in reverse. And so we're asking ourselves here, what times 3x here is going to equal 9x squared? And of course, that would be 3x. And then what times 3x here would equal a minus 15x? And of course, that would be a minus 5 or negative 5. And so we would write that as minus 5. Now, you could check this by distributing. And notice you get 9x squared minus 15x, and we're back to where we started. And so the answer we got here is good. The other thing I want to say is if you look inside the parentheses and you see a common factor, then you know you haven't gotten the greatest common factor. And so that's something to watch out for when you're factoring out a GCF. All right, let's go ahead and look at number 2. So if you haven't, you may want to stop the video and try it. It's a little bit different, but it's the same idea. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do it. Basically, what we have here is a common factor of x minus 5 if you look at these two terms. Now, terms are separated by a plus or a minus sign, and terms are made up of products. So here we have x squared times x minus 5, and here we have a minus 2 times x minus 5, so that you can see in both terms you have x minus 5 times something. And so that is your greatest common factor. And so we're going to have, let me go back. We're going to have two terms since there's two terms here. And x minus 5 times this first term should equal x squared times x minus 5. Well, we need an x squared there. And then we're going to look for what we multiply here times x minus 5 that gives us this other term. And notice we have a minus 2 times x minus 5. And so we'll put in a minus 2 here. And so this is our solution. And if we multiply x minus 5, think of that as a single quantity times x squared. We get x squared times x minus 5. And then x minus 5 times a minus 2, that would be a minus 2 times x minus 5. And so again, by multiplication, you can see we get back to where we started. It's a nice thing about factoring was we could always check our answers using multiplication. And so that last one checks as well. So now we're ready to factor by grouping. So let's go ahead and look at a problem here. We have x cubed plus 2x squared plus 5x plus 10. So first of all, in college algebra, when we see 4 terms, normally factoring by grouping is what we're going to do. And so here's how we're going to do this. I've got some steps. I'm going to tell you the steps, but I'm hoping that just by doing a few problems, you won't need to write out steps, but you'll understand the process. So first of all, we're going to group the first two terms and the last two terms. That's why we call this factor by grouping, or factoring by grouping. And so we've done that here. And then next we're going to factor out the GCF for each pair. So in the first pair we have x cubed plus 2x squared. The GCF is x squared, and it would be, let's see, x squared times something is x cubed, that would be x. And x squared times something is 2x squared, and that would just be 2. And so we'll do the same thing now with the second two terms, 5x plus 10. You can see that 5 would be your greatest common factor, and then there's two terms again, so it'll be 5 times x is 5x, and 5 times 2 is the 10. Now at this point, we need to figure out what sign goes in the middle, or do we have an addition or a subtraction here? Well, you can see that 5x plus 10, both terms are positive, so this would have to be a plus. And so now we're going to factor just like we did with the last problem. We have two terms with a common factor of x plus 2. Oh, third step. Finish as we did with problem 2 on the last slide. So we're going to do what we just did on the last slide. So let me finish this. So x plus 2 is our common factor, and we're going to have two terms inside parentheses. So x squared times this first term is going to be x squared times x plus 2. So we need an x squared there. And x plus 2 times this second term here has got to be 5 times x plus 2. And so that'll be plus 5. And so that is our answer. And I just want to make one more note here. We can easily check this. Remember, we can always check it by factoring. And we should get back to what we started with. And so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to FOIL this. So it'll be x times x squared is x cubed. X times 5 is 5x. The inner product is 2x squared. And the last product is 10. And we just need to write this in descending order, where we have the highest power all the way down to the constant. And you can see that that is the same as what we started with. All right, so that's the process. Let's go ahead and practice. All right, so we've got xy plus y plus 2x plus 2. If you'd like, you can go ahead and try it and then watch the video. Otherwise, or either way, let's go ahead and do it now. So if you look at, first of all, let's group our terms, our first pair and our second pair. And if you look at xy plus y, the only common factor is the y factor. So it'll be y times some binomial. Well, to get xy, I need to multiply y times x. And to get y times 1 would be y. And with the other one, you have 2x plus 2. 2 is the common factor. And 2 times x would be 2x, and 2 times 1 would be the 2. Again, we got to figure out what sign to put in the middle here. And it's got to be positive. Notice a positive 2 times x is the 2x here, and a positive 2 times 1 is the 2 here. And so you can see that it checks. You could always multiply and make sure what you get in this line is actually going to work. So now we can look at our two terms and see that x plus 1 is the common factor. And it's going to be times a binomial since there's two terms. So again, x plus 1 times something is this term here. So I'm missing the y. And then x plus 1 times this term is going to be this term here. And so you can see we're missing the 2. And so that's our answer, x plus 1, the quantity x plus 1 times the quantity y plus 2. All right, so I want to show you something at this point because there's a nice little trick. The thing is, this step here is a key step. When you factor out the GCF in the two pairs, have you noticed that we're getting the same thing inside the parentheses? In this case, we had x plus 1 in both of these. And in fact, that's what happened on number 1 as well. We had a common factor what was in the parentheses. And that has to be true because remember, the next step is to look for the GCF, and it's going to be x plus 1. It's going to be what's in the parentheses. So as we do these problems, we know what to expect now. We should get the same thing in both sets of parentheses. The other thing I want to point out here is there's a nice slick little trick to get the y plus 2 that we're getting here. You can actually just cross off the x plus 1 terms, or those parentheses, and you can see the y plus 2, and that's what we're getting, this y plus 2. So that's another way to get that other binomial. So let's go ahead and use that technique now. Let's move on to number 3. So we have 10x cubed minus 25x squared plus 4x minus 10. Again, if you want to try to do this first, you're certainly welcome to do that and then check your answer. Let's go ahead and do this now. So if you look at the first, well, let's go ahead and pair up our terms. If you look at the first two terms, the common factor for 10 and 25 is 5, and the smallest power of x is x squared. So 5x squared is our GCF. Let's see, what times 5x squared here is going to give us 10x cubed? Well, we're going to need a 2x. Make sure you get a 2 and an x there. And if you multiply these together, you do get 10x cubed. And then you now are looking at this term here. What does that need to be so that you get a negative 25x squared? You're going to need a minus 5. So here's the thing. If I did that work correct, then I can just go ahead and put a 2x minus 5 over here as I factor these two terms here. And now I'm just asking myself, what do I need to put times 2x minus 5 that's going to give me the 4x minus 10? And that's just going to be a plus 2. Now you can certainly check this. 2 times 2x is the 4x here. And 2 times a minus 5 gives you the minus 10 here. So that definitely works. Just like you could check this multiplication here to make sure that you're getting what we have here. So we can always check that. What we have here is equal to what's above. It's just now factored. It's in a different form. So we have a common factor in our two terms of 2x minus 5. And if we cross those out, you can see what's left over is 5x squared plus 2. All right, we've got 2 more problems. Let's go ahead and move on to those. So I would encourage you to try to do both of these. They both have something just a little bit different about them, and so I think it'll be useful for you to see these. But let's see if you can do it and then watch the video. All right, so here we go. In the first one, you have your first pair and your second pair in 6t cubed plus 3t squared. The greatest common factor is 3t squared. Of course, 3t squared times 2t would give you the 6t cubed, and 3t squared times 1 will give you 3t squared. So assuming, assuming we did our work correctly, we're expecting a 2t plus 1 over here. Well, it just happens to be 2t plus 1. And so sometimes students or people get stuck with what to do here. But all we're going to need to do is multiply by 1. So it'll be a plus 1. So let's go ahead and do that. And so this becomes, our common factor for these two terms is 2t plus 1. And the other factor is going to be 3t squared plus 1. You can see that after you cross these off. That's what's left. And so that's our answer. All right, let's go ahead and look at number 5. So let's pair up the first two pair, or the first pair and the second pair. Y squared is the common factor for that first pair. And notice y squared times y will give you the y cubed, and y squared times 4 will give you the 4y squared. So again, assuming we did this right, now keep in mind, if you're factoring by grouping, and what you have in the parentheses is not the same, and you can't seem to get it the same, that's an indicator that you've done something wrong. Now, there is no guarantee that if you have 4 terms, you're going to be able to factor by grouping. But at least for now, the ones we're going to give you are going to be factorable. All right, so let's go ahead and put our y plus 4 over here. So we just got to figure out what times y plus 4 is going to give us this minus 2y minus 8. And we're going to have to multiply by a negative 2 here. Excuse me. Notice negative 2 times y will give us this negative 2y. And negative 2 times 4 will give us the minus 8. So that does work. And so now we have our common factor of y plus 4. Again, if it helps, you can always do this. This is your 2 terms with the common factor of y plus 4. And again, if we cross off our 2 factors in the parentheses, what's left over is y squared minus 2. And that's our final answer. Now, I just want to remind you, I think I've said this enough, but we can always check our answers here. So if you got to number 5 and you're like, man, I think that's right, but I'm not sure, well, you can always check it. So you'd FOIL. Y times y squared is y cubed. Your outer product is a minus 2y. Your inner product is a plus 4y squared. And your last product is minus 8. Just change your order, and you can see we're back to where we started here. All right, and so that's going to be it for this video. That's all.